Yes, and this meeting is being recorded in case you didn't catch that. So, Paul, if you want to turn on your camera, I'm going to do the same thing. And I am going to welcome our speaker for today, Mr. Paul Reams. So if I may, I'll start with an introduction, and it's a good one, guys. So take some notes, especially you EEDs. So Mr. Reams, his formal title is Executive Director of Entertainment for Treasure Island Hotel and Casino. Now, Paul has been a director for over 35 years in the entertainment industry. He's managed budgets, projects, theatrical operations, and personnel. And get this, he oversees all facets of the Treasure Island entertainment venues. Now, this includes daily operations, technical departments, the ticket office, the convention audio visual, the technical services departments, and the business administration of the entertainment department. I don't know anybody who can do all of that. He's also responsible for all the technical operating systems for all show control, audio, video, and lighting equipment used throughout the property. So a great connection for our entertainment engineering and design students. In addition, he manages the business interests and partnerships with the Cirque du Soleil and the Mystere show. Has anybody seen Mystere? First show I ever saw in Las Vegas, still my favorite. I don't know. I like the Beatles too. That's a toss-up. That's a tough one for me. But anyway, he books, contracts, and manages all entertainment throughout TI's entertainment venues. He coordinates with all the notable talent agencies for national entertainment artists, celebrities, and DJs. And he's a strategic member to the TI Executive Operations Committee, which really works in conjunction with the entire hotel operation, the food and beverage group, the finance group, communications, marketing, casino security, and engineering departments. Don't forget engineering, to maximize the overall success of the property by the implementation of strategic planning, budget operations, and goal setting. And of course, he continues to develop business partnerships with Cirque du Soleil, industry vendors, promoters, and national talent agencies. Please help me welcome Mr. Paul Reams, who I'm so excited that you are joining us today, because I have to tell this quick story. I met Paul when we had an international group of students here from South Korea, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to take a backstage tour of the Beatles show. And I got to join that group, and that's how I met Paul. And he gave us an extensive tour and told us all these fascinating things about the show. If you have not seen Love, you need to just move. You just need to leave Las Vegas. Because I don't know why you're here. So we've got to get our entertainment back, right, Paul? So that everybody can go.
Absolutely.
Love and go see Mystere and all the welcome. We're so glad to have you here today. So you've had your finger in so many different shows and so many different venues over the years here in Las Vegas. What's been your favorite thing to do in the entertainment industry? Of all the things you've done so many different things.
Well, I've lived through a lot of different elements and challenges, both, professionally and personally. So to find the best thing, I would say it would have been moving to Las Vegas. If you was to ask me that question 20 years ago, that would be the pinnacle that I was sort of aspiring to. But now that I'm here, I think the thing that I enjoy the most is really working hand in hand with Cirque, and pushing those boundaries of the development of entertainment now.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have one thing that I can put ahead of anything else at the moment, except with the exception of spending time with my family and my two daughters. So
Oh,
that probably outranks anything.
nice answer. I think one of the things that really impressed me the most about you, listening to you talk about love and how it was all put together with input from the remaining Beatles who are still alive and their families, their wives got involved and all of that, was the amount of detail, the history that you knew about how My Guitar Gently Weeps was re-recorded. I mean, just the details that you had about each song and how it was put together, and uh, the number of tracks that each, I mean, it was unbelievable. I was sitting there with my mouth open the entire time because the wealth of knowledge that you had about that show was so impressive.
It's definitely, you learn it quickly, especially when you sit in the theater very late at night. There's no lights on, and you're listening to that music, and you hear those subtle nuances and the shift of from one song to another song and how they're blended. And I had no idea the Beatles wrote so much material
Me either.
until I started that project. So it's quite mind blowing in many ways.
You know, I could talk to you about that for hours, but we're not here to talk. I know the students are going to probably have some questions, and I hope the EEDs will have some good entertainment questions for you as we go through this. But we're really here today to help students set themselves apart because there's so much competition now. We've had this virus, this pandemic hit, and they watched their senior colleagues from last year lose internships and jobs because of that virus. And they're a little nervous. The seniors are a little nervous right now about graduating into what they perceive as possibly one of the worst job markets, certainly in their lifetime. We're older, we've seen it come and go, and we know it fluctuates and moves, and that's just the way it is. Comes and goes. But they really want some tips, I think, on how to set themselves apart with a standout resume. And with your background in the entertainment industry, we thought you would be the perfect person to help us with that today.
Sure, I'll try to do my best to provide that to everybody. I am not the end all be all of resume building. I've written many of them, and I've rewritten probably even more. So you need to take that into consideration as we work through this process and how I explain some of my insight to that. But just to put perspective to it, over 35 years ago, I was in a very similar situation that you are today. I was a double major. My primary was civil engineering, and then I was minoring, if you will, in the theater, and only because the theater department didn't have enough resources available to them, especially to work through some of the technical challenges. So I kind of had a mind for it, and they threw really good parties because the civil engineers did not have very good parties. That's a joke. So hopefully everybody laughed at that. Pardon me.
What are you talking about?
So my point being is that don't be afraid to take a risk, and you never know. You're never quite sure where it's going to take you. And I'll speak to this a little bit later, but my calling or my professional job was to be a civil engineer. That didn't quite work out that way, and I'm very thankful for that. And but I use those skills still today. I even still have my slide rule. I think you guys all have calculators probably, but anyway. I challenge you to use one. Anyhow, so my destination really started with, I took a risk. I tried something different, and then I found myself here. So there was quite a journey in which to get me to this location, but I've reached what I believe is my pinnacle now. Originally, when I moved to Vegas, or before I moved to Vegas, I thought this is where good stagehands go to retire. You land yourself in a showroom, and I'd become the prop guy who lives in the little, the little closet under the stairs, and nobody bothers me, and I go out and I mop the floor, and I'm very content. It's definitely not what that is now. And even in my new role now, I see that we have to, I never thought we would be in this situation we are now, in our environment, in our world. And I'm relearning and how we're going to achieve a restart in our business operations. So it's something that I know nothing of, and I have to learn my way through it and work through it, as we all have been doing. So of that career, I took a challenge in college. I came out of college. I took another risk and said, I'm not going to be a civil engineer. I'm going to do this theater thing. And I went off to do melodrama. And that led to a couple other things, a few phone calls, a few recommendations. And then that led to some bus and truck tours. That led to national tours. I spent 22 years on the road doing national tours, and then I came to Vegas. And then when I moved here, I realized that it was a much different environment than what I thought it was. And I decided that I needed to aspire to take on an executive director role. And now I've found myself in that position. So, and through that whole thing, there's a resume attached to it. So, so hopefully I can kind of touch on some of those subjects that make sense to everybody.
And Paul, if you don't mind, I'm just going to let everybody know we got many resumes, and thank you all so much for submitting your resumes. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to everybody today. So if you don't see your resume being reviewed today, please don't take it personally. It's just, we just couldn't get everybody in. So we let Paul select the resumes that he wanted to talk about for whatever reason or another. But do you want to share with them what you shared with me about the folks that we don't get to today? Do you want to talk about that?
Yes.
Next? Okay.
So I'll touch on that right now. We have kind of a limited time, and I like to talk a lot, and I go off topic. So I don't want to take everybody's time. It's very valuable to you. So I'll try to keep this as short as possible. Any good orator knows that no meeting should last more than 90 minutes. So, or you start losing people. Therefore, those individuals that I don't get to, I will make an attempt to reach out and contact you each individually. And even those that I kind of cover today, I think there's about 6 of them that I picked. They fall in line with a lot of other people's, so you can look at your own and kind of compare it and go, oh, yes, mine is similar to that. I can take some of this advice, or you don't have to take any advice. That's up to you. But I will reach out to you, maybe not today or tomorrow, but over the next couple weeks. As I can fit them into my schedule, I'll reach out to you and I'll talk to you individually about your resume. So if I have that currently, I don't want this to be an open call, so don't invite all of your friends to send me their stuff, but I'll try to make an attempt to at least address that. And in doing a resume, there's no perfect way to do it, but hopefully this will offer you a guide on how to draft one and to make it a statement of who you are. Ultimately, it's yours to decide if you use it or not. I'm not selling anything but my knowledge of what I look for when I hire entertainment people. There's many ways to write a resume or a CV. Try to think who is reviewing your information from the employer side, and what would they want to see in your resume? Does it stand out? What sets it apart from others? It's a hard question, but one deserves the thought. But most of all, make it presentable. Make sure the format is good, content is good. If you choose to put a color in it, how does that color print? Take a look at it, show it to somebody else, because sometimes the content you put on top of a colored format, you lose the content of the printing of what you're trying to display. So definitely take note of that. I'm not going to get into a definition of resume and CV. If you need that, you can look it up. But the resume is more of a brief summary, and a CV is a very detailed, in the weeds review of who you are. And most often a CV is used for outside of the US applications. Find a template that you like. Share it with your friends or colleagues and get their feedback. Use a basic font, nothing fancy. Make sure you've got correct information. Write a summary or a statement at the beginning of your resume. List the experience, skills and interests, education, references. I know Marion has talked with some of you about the ATS systems for sorting applications. This is an important tool that employers use now to sort out those applicants. Just be wary don't get fancy with the template though. Charts, graphs, colors, all of those things will bury your contact information. If you have a lack of keywords in your resume, they get kicked out. So you're less likely to see a real person. Above all, don't submit an incomplete, incompatible file type. Do some research before you submit it. Find out how, you can reach out to those organizations. You can make a cold call. You can ask. If they don't answer your question, what's there to be lost? So it's worth, again, stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit. Match and align your resume or your CV to the position you are applying. So this means you could have multiple resumes. So you need to consider that. Just don't come up with one and call it one and done. So I'd mentioned about a summary or a statement. I believe that you need, and I like to see someone who writes their story. It doesn't need to be 5 paragraphs. It can be very simple. It can be 2 or 3 sentences. But it needs to tell your story. You need to have an impact. You want to grab someone's attention. And I'm pretty sure that most of you wrote an essay for your entrance into UNLV or other universities when you were applying for schools. Take that same passion and now put it into your resume and the business that you're applying to. Have you done the research on the employer? Why do they need to hire you? Again, set yourself apart from others. And this is a good way of doing that. My story in my resume goes, it's a little long and winded, but I'm going to read it. I'm a highly efficient director manager with over 30 years in the entertainment industry, managing budgets, projects, operations, and personnel. My colleagues know me as an extremely dependable and trustworthy person. I'm a positive motivator, leader, and in my current position with excellent interpersonal and communicational skills. I've accepted a wide variety of responsibilities and tasks throughout my career that have allowed for my organizational and attention to detail skills to grow while supporting the company's initiatives. I'm effective at time management and personnel management while maintaining an affable personality. Being self-motivated, I am tenuous in dealing with large quantities of daily time-critical requests, managing high-pressure situations, as I prefer to see things in the infinite rather than the finite. Touring nationally and internationally with various Broadway touring companies in many operational positions has strengthened my ability to manage people and projects throughout my career. So consider applying for jobs in the same manner you applied for schools. Set some goals to achieve. When you applied to your universities, you probably had a safety school, you had a match school, and you had a reach school. Consider that in applying for jobs. A safety job is someplace that you have about an 80% chance of getting employed. It may not be the final destination, but it builds your character and skills and can position yourself to make the next step. A match is something that you believe in that fits you perfectly. It may not be a guaranteed job, but it could be someplace that you could grow from within. Do you like their mission statement? Is it a place you could stay for several years? And then you have your reach jobs. This is the long shot. You have less than 20% possibly of being hired, but it could happen. But don't corner yourself into holding out for that dream job. Be humble and willing to take what they may give you. Consider the intern role, as many companies hire the full-time employee after completion of the internship. Do the research on those companies. But don't put all of your marbles in one bag. Consider those options. So in my case, yeah, I wanted to eventually come to Vegas. I wanted to be the executive director of entertainment, but it started out moving chairs and stands for the community symphony. And then it was some dance concerts and then community concerts. Then I went to melodrama. I did some small bus and truck tours. Then I went to some national tours. Then I went to Cirque du Soleil, and now I'm here at Treasure Island. So there are steps to be taken. Um, and don't be afraid of that. A format in a resume that I like to see is start with that summary first. It's the who, what, and why. But make it simple, impactful, and then you've set the hook on those people that review those resumes or they have it in their hand. List the experience. Now there's two schools of thought here. Education should probably come first if you're looking to go on to continue your education. You may want to put that before experience. But for myself, I want to see what you've done. I know what school you've gone to. I don't need to go into great depths and detail about that. I'll read it if I get that far. But I want to know what your experience is. What have you been doing, even though you've been a student? And don't be afraid to put down there that you're a fry cook or a dishwasher. It shows that you're humble and you're willing to do whatever it needs to get the job done. You're willing to mop that floor because the floor needs to be mopped, right? Even though you're a drafts person, you're still willing to do that. So experience, what are your interests and your involvement? Who are you outside of work? What are you, a mountain climber? Maybe you would be a good rigger. You have a high attention to safety. So from the entertainment side, that's important to me. Then we get into education and references. In your involvements, if you haven't involved yourself, you need to get involved. This only helps build your relationships and strengthens your potential leadership roles within your teams. So maybe you don't need to be the leader of the team, but you can certainly learn how to support those teams. And the only way you do that is to involve yourself outside of your, call it your track. Have you made business connections outside of schools? Do you have any mentors, businesses, or clubs that you follow or take part in? Maybe you're a member of a gamer club. Okay, for me, that's a trigger for how I would hire an automation console operator, because I know they have good eye-hand coordination. They're focused on the screen. They don't get distracted. They pay attention to exactly what's going on the screen. They see the numbers turning and they know what all those numbers mean. So again, little things like that are triggers for someone like me who reviews those resumes. And there's an importance in just establishing as many of those personal connections as you can with as many people as you can. Someday it will pay off. And in my case, it has. Over the 35, 40 years, my actual turning in of a resume, putting it someone's hand, has probably been less than a dozen times, if that. Only because I've made those connections and they've seen me in action, if you will, and it was a phone call that led to a job offer, or a phone call that led to a possible job that somebody knew about. So anytime you can get in those social rooms, uh, exchange information, take advantage of it. It will take you out of your comfort zones. It's like going on a first date. So be willing to do that. And even those connections at some point might break down, and you'll want to burn some of those bridges, but you can't, as painful as it may be, because it will eventually lead you to where hopefully you want to be. If you have multiple interests, you should consider targeted resumes to those industries. So doesn't mean you have to list every single interest that you have, but target some of those to a particular employer. Does that employer have a softball team and you just happen to play softball? Well, put that on your resume. You're the greatest softball catcher of all time. I don't know, but put something into that fits with that employer, fits you, and maybe it will help blossom yourself within that organization. So yes, you have all of these skills. You have all these accolades. You're, a 4.3 GPA, and all of that means nothing to me. But boy, you have a softball team, and you like to play? Well, maybe that's the person I want to have on my team.
So, Paul, you have a question from Kayla. She'd like to know if you have advice on finding a contact within a company that she knows she wants to work for.
I would start with the recruiter, probably. If they don't have a recruiter, which some companies don't, there's, if it's a particular department, you might want to just cold call and talk to a manager of a department, if that's the direction that you want to go. You'll eventually get to where you're going, but sometimes it has to be just a cold call. There's no great way of doing it. As a matter, I made 2 cold calls today on two subjects of trying to reopen entertainment here at Treasure Island. I needed to reach out. I didn't know who to call, so I made a couple cold calls, and they got me to where I wanted to be. So you have to be willing to do that. You're going to look kind of foolish a little bit, possibly, but the only one that sees that is you.
She just said,
sorry, my executive assistant put a note up on my door and I had to read it, so sorry.
oh, no problem. And Kayla was just saying, thank you for that answer. And Allie has a question. If someone were to be a performer and applied for a position, what type of triggers would there be for you? If someone were to be a performer and applying for a position, what type of triggers would there be for you?
Well, in this case, it would be what are those outside interests? Have you done a little self-education? Have you, are you a mountain climber? Maybe you went to crane operators school. Maybe you went to USITT and you sat in on a lighting course. Just little things like that will help spur the dialogue. So, and sometimes I'll say, well, they don't have a whole lot of experience, but their experience is because they were a performer. All right. Well, what was their what was their skill in being a performer? Are you a high wire act? Okay, well, you understand the principles of rigging. You understand the principles of safety. You have attention to detail. So those elements will help. Now, there was a time when, especially with circ shows, they only wanted people that had 5 years, 10 years of experience on major theatrical productions. Those days have come and gone. One, we've expanded entertainment here in this town, and all we're doing is stealing people from each other. So we've had to, I don't want to say lower our standard, but we've had to cut back on that 5 years of experience. So I'll tend to look more at what are their interests? What else do they like to do? And does it fit with what I'm trying to hire? Yeah, I'm trying to hire a carpenter. Okay, but are they really going to be building anything? No, they're going to be pushing or pulling scenery. They're going to be running show cues. They're going to follow a script. So it's about attitude and aptitude. I can teach you a skill, but I can't teach attitude. I can't teach aptitude. Either you have that or you don't. And so I am not one who gets all tied up in someone's experience necessarily, but I want to kind of know who they are as an individual. And what sort of makes them tick. That's sort of where I spend my time.
You know, I think that's really refreshing for people to hear. They don't often hear that their personality and their character and their philosophy of life or their values are really what the recruiter might be interested in. So that's a really nice thing to hear, I think. And important, because I think you're right. When recruiters particularly really look at that candidate
Yep.
as a whole instead of just what they can do for that company in that role, they're going to make a much better hire.
So now I kind of move into that dark world of references. Do you list them? Do you not list them? Is it on the first page? Is it on the second page? Upon request. There's two rules of thumb. You can do it or not, and you can provide it later. But really, what are you hiding? Why would you want to provide it later? That just means it's another phone call. That means you're making that recruiter or the potential interviewer, you're creating more work for them. So put it out there. What's the harm? Nothing, in my opinion. Just because you were trying to get it all onto one page of paper, all right, well then submit two with your references attached to that on the second page. But consider who your references are. Make sure that they know you're submitting their name, and have a conversation with those individuals and make sure you tell them maybe what you want them to say on your behalf. And have that conversation. Maybe some of your references would be better for this employer, and these people would be good for that employer. They don't all have to be the same, but don't make it a one and done deal conversation. Each time you apply, you should have that conversation with your reference. Just so they're not blindsided, and then maybe they say something you don't want them to say. That you've been out with the theater people partying, and I don't know. So just be careful. So that's my opinion of references. Do as you wish. Make sure that you have clarity and your resume is concise. What have you done in your, it needs to tell someone what you have done and who you are.
And Paul, Angelica has a question, if that's all right. She's asking, is it okay then to put experiences unrelated to the job description on your resume?
Yes, why not? Did you get paid for it? It's a professional experience. 100%. Even if it was a $2 an hour job, you were expected to do something and you were expected to deliver on it, and hopefully you did. And so it's a professional job. Don't undercut yourself. Again, it shows, oh, okay, I can kind of see your career path here a little bit, but then you had to jump out and do this really strange thing for a few months. Then that to me says, oh, maybe there was a life issue there and you had to make a choice. But now you're back onto it. So again, that shows there's some commitment there. You're willing to take those risks, and it might be somebody that would fit within who I'm trying to hire. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all. You don't want employment gaps, that's for sure. So if you have to fudge the dates a little bit, I would recommend that, because again, some of those filters that filter resumes, they look at those job dates, and if there's a gap, well, they think that you've been spending some time upstate for something you don't want to tell anybody about. So be careful with that.
So you have another question
yes.
regarding your references. What kind of people would be the best references to list, and could you list a mentor as one of those references?
Absolutely. You could put anybody on there because they're speaking to your character. That's what you want them to do. You want that individual to say, yeah, this is the best employee you are ever going to hire because of X, Y, and Z. So they're speaking on your behalf. They're speaking to your character. They're speaking to your knowledge of a particular equipment, situation, whatever that might be. So it could be someone that you work with, that you volunteer. It could be but they're seeing your caring, loving, giving of yourself to the situation. So it doesn't have to be, you have a mentor. Yes, they've been working with me and I've seen their growth and I see their potential. And then it could be someone that you work side by side with, or it's a manager, or so that's why I say sometimes you can take those references, and they don't need to be, you don't need 10, you need 3 good ones. And but it shouldn't be your roommate, and it shouldn't be the people that you hang out with at the park, or just because you want them to truly speak to your character and to your abilities. So this is a point where I wanted to show you a resume of someone that I reviewed, for about all of 10 seconds. And this is a resume you should not submit. It's just a list of nonsense to me. You have all these accolades. You've done all these, but what have you done? For all I know, you could have just been pushing a road case on Cinderella. I don't know, and I don't want to get involved in it. So don't make it a list. Put some content in there that means something. And so I caution against doing something like that. And from what I have seen, no one has done that. But don't get sucked into that hole that you feel like, oh, I need to list every possible thing that I've done. Well, you can still do that, but in a condensed version. I talked about interest, who you are outside the thing, and think of your resume as a flashing sign from Fremont Street. You want to draw attention to yourself with telling of your story. And believe me, everyone is attracted to the flashing light at some point. So make yours stand out. Now, we've talked a lot about what goes into a resume. We talked about the summary or possibly the statement at the beginning. Well, that statement can be your brand. So I would challenge all of you to sit down, take some time, and create your brand. Who are you? Everybody knows Coca-Cola. They can change that can 80 different ways, but everybody knows who Coca-Cola is and what it is. They can change the color, they can change the swoop, they can change the name, but it's still Coke, right? So what is your brand? It's not an easy question, and it certainly isn't easy to answer, but it's going to help identify who you and what you know to a prospective employer. You're going to write it. If you write it, you're going to rewrite it a dozen times. It's kind of like writing your obituary, but you need to make it from a business perspective because you're selling yourself to these individuals or to these companies. Above all, proofread your resume. Have a colleague do it as well. The last thing you want is some kind of typo or error or misunderstanding. Share it. But proofread it. Please proofread it.
Paul, you have two more questions about references. That's really stirred a lot of questions. So with the references, do they just put the email or email and phone number for those references?
I would do both.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any right or wrong way of that.
Right.
You want to make sure it's as easily acceptable to those individuals to reach out to someone. So they're more likely to click on their email link than pick up the phone. Unless it's, and I say that from if I'm hiring 30 people, because we have a mass hiring, I may not reach out and do a phone interview or a phone call, but I'll click that email link and I'll say, hi, I'm considering so-and-so, and do you have anything you would like to offer to tell me? Please respond, and you're likely to get something that way faster. Again, it's about what people are doing in their day and how much time they have to spend on it. So I would try to make it as simple and as accessible to those employers. And if you're providing an email link, be careful on the reference and what their email address is, because sometimes they may not be the most, call it, politically correct email name, because there's some doozies out there. So be cautious of that, because again, those people represent you. And if you're putting something out there that is like, whoa, who is this? They're going to wonder that same thing about you.
Angelica is also wondering what the difference is between a personal reference and a professional one, and who would be a good personal reference.
Well, a personal reference might, I'll use the same analogy. Maybe they're your climbing partner. So at some point, either you have their life or they have your life in their hands. So that would be maybe a personal reference that can speak to your safety. And then a professional one is obviously, I think, is just somebody who, it might be your mentor. It might be your somebody who you work under in a particular job or position. But again, you could list just professional references if you think that is what's best. You could mix it up or just list some references. You don't need to distinguish between them. If you're in an interview, that they may ask you, well, who is this person or who is this person, and you can provide that. You can also suggest that they contact this individual as a personal reference and this person as a professional reference, to give you an idea of two different sides of the equation. But I don't know if you need to specifically call it out if it's a business, professional or personal, in my thought pattern. So I showed you this one that I didn't like. I'm gonna now sort of talk through a couple that were submitted to me, and I'm just going to kind of give you an overview of what those looked like. So if I could have that first slide, thank you. So my comment here is I like the summary at the beginning of this, but instead of the word summary, I think just make it the impact statement. You don't need to put statement there. You don't need to put anything there. It's just, here it is, set the hook, and then hopefully they read everything else. You might want to consider some work on the format on this. Also, I don't think we have it, but this came as 2 pages. I would, in redoing the format, fit it into 1 page. Again, print it so you see what it's going to look like when the printer spits it out. Because not everybody, it may come on 2 pages, it may not. So there's my thought on that one. The next one. Okay, my comment here, it's too much blue, but I like the format. Everything is blue in this. When you look at it online, print it, and it's harder to read in when it's printed. So consider that. It looks like everything is a link because everybody knows blue is a link now. Rewrite your opener on this one. It's missing something. It didn't quite make I was missing something at the beginning of it. So maybe it was just me, but consider rewriting this. Use a stronger word than I find myself. I think I am. I believe. Tell them I am the best that's ever been. I will be that person for you. You need to hire me, right? So just consider a stronger use of that. I see myself. Okay. Why not just tell them I am a team leader? I am the best team leader. I will be your best team leader. You know, put yourself forward. Next one.
We also have a question, Paul, about
Yep.
formal photographs on resumes.
I typically don't see them. So I equate a photo with a casting call. I'm trying to hire a dancer. I'm trying to hire an actor. I want to see their face. And especially in our environment right now, all of these interviews are being done just the way we're holding this session right now. You're on a camera, so they see who you are. But I will say a word of advice is consider your background. You know, put some thought into what's behind you that could be distracting, may not be distracting. Just remember that not just use on that camera, but everything else. So it could be your laundry. It could be.
And Paul, would you agree that most resumes with photographs, those are typically from European or other countries outside the US? It is considered appropriate in many, many other countries, not so much here.
Very true. And my exposure to that is very limited. So, and I only see it from an entertainment perspective. So when we're looking at this for, we'll say for the EED students, and you're applying to those engineering companies, they may require that. I mean, there's no harm in it. We all kind of have our own little emoji, if you will, in our email signatures. So there's no reason why you couldn't maybe put a little headshot in it or attach it on a separate page. But it can't hurt. The thing about a resume, it's supposed to be a blank picture with no prejudice. So I wouldn't want to give people too much thought into that. Sell it on your credentials. Who cares what you look like? That's my philosophy on it. But I don't think that it's harmful. Another question or no? Or keep going?
I think good. I think we've answered all the questions so far.
Okay, so next slide.
Wait, Marion?
Oops.
Oh,
wrong
you
order.
have a question?
Excuse me?
Please go right
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, go back.
Yeah, you actually skipped the last one.
Yeah, thank you. This one. Add a statement to this. I like the layout. It's good. If you could find a way to maybe put your references in here a little bit, you might have to just condense some of the information a little bit and still get your point across. But you could add the references on a second page. I would also, and again, it's just me and it depends upon where you're applying, and you might have several versions of this, but consider moving your skills and organizations up and the education down. And that's hard to say because you spend a lot of money on that block on your resume and you want to put it out there. But that's not where my eye is drawn to first. So depending upon the employer or university, school, higher education, you might have 3 or 4 resume folders with slightly different versions of this. There is no one be all of that. And you're going to constantly, you need to keep it as fresh as you can because you're going to constantly update it. Put your most relevant work first. What are you doing right now? And because I did see one, I think, where your experience was listed backwards. So you were telling me what you were doing out of kindergarten. And then you were talking about what you were doing at UNLV last. No, that should be the other way around. And you don't have to go back more than 10 years. Even I don't do that anymore. I've taken the last, I used the most relevant work, maybe the last 8 years, if you will, possibly. And I talk about that. And then everything else past that point is just one generic term, right? Over 30 years of experience in blah, 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 blah. Yeah. If they really want to know, they'll ask. But here's what I'm doing right now. I've achieved this level, so they know I have the experience. They're not going to call my very first employer to get a reference on me because those people aren't even there anymore. So they don't know me from Adam. Okay, education. Yeah, I like this one. We talked about that one, right? Yep. Next one. Okay, good layout. I liked it. Consider, again, moving education. That's just me. You could tighten up your statement at the top, possibly put your reference in here, or at least add them on a second page. Don't let your descriptions of the work experience get too long-winded. But otherwise, I thought this one was pretty good. Again, just where you have your contact information at the top, which we can't see, I lose it in the fill color. So it's hard for me to read it unless the light is just perfect. So think about that. Okay, and then the next one. This one, it needs a statement at the beginning of it. And there's certainly some room in here for some references. But it fits on one page. It looks good to me. This one showed me that you're willing to do a lot of different things. You've done some various outside interests. So, but who are you? Tell me at the top. You know, knock my socks off in there with some kind of, where do you want to go in life? What is the brand? What sets you off from others that I need to hire you for? And that was the last one I said, right? Or chose? Or is there another one?
Okay. You had
So
six.
this one, again, put a statement up here at the top. Consider moving the education, but it was in 3 pages. It's way too long. You need to condense this in some fashion. But 3 pages, you've lost me. I probably wouldn't even consider it.
And that's typical of what we hear from recruiters. So I often will tell students, you think you're writing a resume for yourself, but you're really writing a resume for a recruiter. And recruiters don't want to read 3 pages. They just won't spend the time on it.
And a recruiter only knows what the hiring manager has told them. So that's the tricky part in this. You have to understand, or you have to kind of guess at what the hiring manager wants, because they're telling the recruiter. The recruiter is looking on your application or on your resume to find that information. So in this case, if it's 3 pages long and you haven't even got to your references yet, you're wasting their time. They're going to move on. So, how can you condense some of this information? How can you, and maybe in this particular case, you've got 3 different resumes sitting here. So take some time, spend a little bit of time filtering that and go, oh, well, yeah, if I just pull this out and this out and this out, I've got a whole nother resume. And if I look at this and this and this, I got another whole nother resume. So it's possible to pull it together a little bit and then and come to that, closer to that one, possibly 2 pages with references. But I'm very much a proponent of 1 page.
Yeah. And that's what we hear from recruiters as well.
Mm-hmm. And then I thought I would just, I'm going to touch again on what your brand is. It's going to be your calling card. It is your business card. My brand has to include my ability to do great work and provide a service to others. And again, I see myself in a infinite position rather than a finite position. To have others say that I always work to better myself while putting others ahead of my own needs, that'll be my legacy. There's a sense of humility and selfishness that I carry with me day to day. I have a desire to create and inspire without the worry of chasing the carrot. If I can create a better leadership through diplomatic and tactful communication, then I've accomplished something for myself and my team, because they will work harder, longer. It will inspire them. And honestly, right now, when I hate to think how long ago it was, but when I was in college, my parents wanted me to have a respectable job. Theater was not respectable in their opinion. So, but I chose to do that over my engineering. And that was a tough pill for them to swallow. But I tell you, I'm still trying to show my parents that it is respectable and a meaningful career. And even though I know they know it now, I still strive to do my best. I still feel as though I have something to prove or something that I can improve. My current position and the one with CERC has taught me to be trustworthy and humble while maintaining that affable personality that I so enjoy. That allows me to, I'm okay to wear a clown nose. And I do that to anybody who walks through the door. Nothing is that serious. Follow your heart, go with your gut, take the risk. And it's worth the reward in the end. You may not think that, but it is. And don't be afraid to invoke and provoke and evoke the senses in yourself and in your resume, because it is who you are and who you want to be. Nothing is beyond your reach. With that, love what you do, love who you do it for, and love who you do it with. So I would be happy
You're
to
back to my
entertain
favorite show.
questions.
You're back to my favorite show. So Camden is asking, is it better to keep my resume concise, even if it means leaving some information out?
Absolutely. I wouldn't, if you had to make that choice, please put what you feel is the most impactful information in it. Don't leave that out.
Okay, and we have another one. What was your first position / experience that got you through the door?
I would just say willing to take the risk to try something you had no idea what you were doing. And my example of that would be in high school. I was a senior. I played in the band and in the orchestra. And I had a way of convincing other people to do things on my behalf without others knowing it. So I was never the fall guy. But the band leader, the choir director, the drama instructor, they needed a stage manager for their spring musical. And they were like, hey, that Reams kid, he always seems to get people to do things that they don't want to do. And so they asked me if I would be the stage manager. I knew nothing about stage management. I didn't even know what the definition of stage management was. I played French horn. What did I know? I knew how to count to 4. So I had to figure it out. I said, well, yeah, sure, it sounds like fun. Do I get a key to the high school? Oh, this could be fun, you know? But I was given this responsibility. I had to figure that out, and I had to make it work, and it was a success. So I think that's really what kind of took me down this path. Yes, I applied to go to a university. Yes, I applied to the engineering department. I was accepted. And then, oh, they have a theater department here too. Was never on my radar. But they had better parties. And we got and that was back in a time when we got to blow things up for fun, right? It wasn't a crime. We got to experiment with special effects and black powder and I mean, it was just it was very intriguing. We could no more do that today than fly, or you would have every federal agency knocking on your door. So, but that's really what set this in motion for me was, yeah, I took a risk. And then I would say there was another one that I may have underestimated the situation. Well, I clearly did. I underestimated the situation. I was not prepared. And I was, I was minutes from a complete meltdown, breakdown, walking off the job. But I took 5 minutes. I reevaluated the situation and assessed, I assessed the situation. I did a quick kind of inventory in my head, and I took a breath and I jumped right back in. And as the cliche, the show went on. The show must go on. I thought I was in over my head, ill prepared, but I can guarantee you that that never happened again. So anything I go or do now, if I need to meet somebody, I need to talk about something I don't fully understand, I educate myself. I come prepared. I'm going to go interview for a company. I'm going to know a little bit about the company. I'm going to know a little bit about the owner. I'm going to know what maybe some of his interests are. And it's not hard to find that information. Most of it is public. It's out there. You don't have to know it by heart and in depth, but just enough to stimulate a dialogue with someone and enough to where they go, oh, this person did a little research on us. That, I think, puts you in front of someone else that did nothing. This just, when I applied to universities, I just printed out 10 essays, put them in an envelope, and out they went. There was no rhyme or reason to why I applied to those schools. It was just, they looked cool. Now I just sat through an outline, a webinar of how my daughter is going to apply to a university. And I was in the back of my chair. I was just blown away by the content and the importance of all of these different factors. And just because it's it could be call it a high priced school, and then you've got a middle price school. Don't discount that high price school just because of how much it costs. Because through grants, through other means, scholarships, that better school or higher price school may not be better, but the higher price school might end up being lower than the mid-range school. And just that whole concept kind of made my head explode a little bit. But I also feel that if I was the dean of admissions to any school, or to all the schools, let's just say it's all the schools, and you applied to Harvard, okay, I'll accept you under one condition. You cannot tell anyone that you went to this school after you graduated. Would you go? Most people are going there only for the name. But if that individual said, no problem, I don't have to tell anybody where I went to school because I want to go there because they have this professor. And I've always wanted to hear what that professor has to say. And I know I could learn something from that individual. I would put him in that school first thing. So consider that in your job. Have you heard about one of those individuals that work there? Is it something that you want to attach to? Or are you just applying to that company because of its name? They have a reputation that's a really long name, and you want your name up there too. Okay, well that's ego. That's okay. We all have it. But what is your motivator there? If it's to work with that person, then go for it. But if it's just for the sake of the name, something tells me that you probably may not work there very long if you get on, because you won't align. It's not a match.
That's a great point, Paul. That's really a wonderful point, and I'm really glad you brought that up. So I typed in the chat and I asked everybody, what's the biggest takeaway today for you? And here are some of the answers that we got. Time is money. Our resume should capture our character and personality, along with experience, interests, and skills that fit the job you're applying to. What is our brand? And another student said the personal aspect that should be included in your resume is my greatest takeaway. And then another student said, I agree with that. And another one said, my biggest takeaway is to include everything in your resume because the employer wants to know who you are. And that can be applied to not only job applications, but to school applications as well.
I would agree with all of those.
Yeah. We don't hear a lot about the personal aspect of people and their personality. Character, yes, which is what you're talking about. But I think you really embellished that today and really kind of brought some more light to that for everybody. So that was great. The whole thing was great. And we really appreciate your time, your reviewing of these resumes, and being willing to talk to the other students directly that did not get their resume selected. That's huge, and we are very grateful for that.
Absolutely. And even if whenever we're able to meet in person a little easier, if someone wants to reach out, contact me and say, can I come down and can you give me 15 minutes of your time and we meet and have a coffee? I'm open to those things. Right now is not the best time, but later. Um,
That's
I'm
great.
very giving in that way. Um, I I like to talk off topic sometimes, but I want to know who these individuals are. Um, just what makes you tick, and how do you fit within the dynamic of the team? And that's probably the hardest. Um, that's probably one of the hardest things I have had to do is tell somebody they didn't get the job because they don't fit with the team dynamic. They have the skills, they have the experience, but you're not your personality, if you will, would clash with the rest of the team here. And that's a hard that's hard for people to understand sometimes because they see themselves as who they are and they think that there's nothing wrong with them. And it's easier for me to tell somebody they didn't get the job based upon your skill, but it's harder to tell them, well, you don't fit the team dynamic and here's why. That's a little harder pill for people to swallow.
Yeah, that's another great point. It's nothing that they have done wrong or nothing wrong with their experience. It's just simply that the dynamic, as you said, is not going to be a fit. It is disappointing.
Especially if you're working with large teams of people. You know, I'll use Mister as an example. It's been here 27 years.
It's incredible.
Some of these people are day one. Some are not, but a lot of them are day ones. So here I'm taking an individual and I'm putting them into that mix. And if they can't work with that team dynamic, it creates friction, which leads to other things. And eventually someone is going to get thrown into a trash can, and then we're separating two individuals from the company. So that's why those things about tell me your interests, tell me your hobbies, what do you do outside of your experience? Who are you as an individual? What is your statement? And I'll base my decisions a lot of times just purely on that. I can teach the skill. I can teach you how to hit the go button. I can teach you to push a piece of scenery when the red light goes off. That's easy. But you can't teach those interpersonal skills if people don't have them, or it makes it a lot harder, and time is money. And in some cases, we don't have that kind of time.
So we are at an hour and a half right now, Paul. Obviously, you had a lot of great engagement here. We have one last question from Lacey, and she just said, without pointing out any specific resume, were there any resumes you received for this seminar that you would have extended an interview to, or is it too difficult to say because it depends on the role? Is it worth sending in a resume to a company we are interested in but don't have job postings, or should we customize for every role? So there's two different questions there. Number one is, did you see any resumes you would have extended an interview to, number one? Did you like?
Well, yes, I did see several, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing because you and I had.
Various, assuming I had the position available, yes, which currently I don't have any available because there's nobody here except me. But there are several in that bunch that, yes, I would have done it for, whether it was a console operator or a mechanical maintenance situation. Mhm.
And then the second part of that question, is it worth sending a resume to a company that they like and are interested in, but there may not be a specific job posting for? Should they just
Why
quit?
not?
Yeah, that's what I think too. Why not?
It's a hurt.
It's better if you can get a connection, if you can network in with someone. That's always and I tell everybody there's two ways to get a job. One is your resume with your skills and experience, selling yourself. The other is networking.
But you can network that, hand them or send them, hand them, put a stamp on it, do something. You can get it to that individual,
That's right.
and um, and then they can pass it on.
Right.
I've had plenty of people hand me a resume saying, "Hey, I ran into this guy and he seemed like a nice guy and he was blah, blah, blah. And I worked with him for a little bit and he's got these really interesting skills. Maybe you should consider it." So, and I call them and say, "Could you apply for this job, please? It's posted. And once you apply, I will take it down." So yeah, that networking is important. And to that point, April 16th, to anyone who is interested, there is, if you didn't know, I sit on the advisory board for the EED. Along with a number of other companies. We are holding a resume review on April 16th. So all of these companies, who I don't know which ones are going to be available, but there's enough of them, will be at the Ahern Hotel, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The morning session will be, call it a speed interview resume review with all of these potential companies. And then if a company has a job posting, an internship, or they're just interested in maybe talking to you more about potential opportunities, we'll schedule callbacks for the afternoon session. So look for some more information on that to come out. We as employers or board members were just asked about doing this again for this year on April 16th. So we're still putting it together. Maybe I jumped the gun a little bit, so if don't throw me all the way under the bus, maybe. But have it on your radar, mark it on your calendar, look for some information coming out. If you haven't heard anything, I would say check in with Marion or with Mike Genova, and they can provide additional details for you if we have, for some reason, we need to change the date. But that's on the horizon. So here's a good opportunity. Take some of my crackpot advice, and maybe you change things, maybe you don't change anything. You go with what you got. Go talk to somebody else. Feel free. I always get a second opinion. I've never bought a car from the first dealership I've walked into. So it's always good to have varying opinions. I have to replace my air conditioner units at my house. I called up 6 companies. I let them come and make their sales pitch. And really, they all have the same product. They all do the same job. It came down to the guy I liked. How did he come dressed? Was he knowledgeable? You know, I use those skills in my everyday, and how I meet people and how I network with them. And believe me, I'm a straight shooter. Don't try to BS me because I'll see right through it. And I don't know, I was getting off topic. So anyhow,
Yeah, I think we're
it's a good opportunity. I would take it if it comes your way.
Paul, I'm going to wrap us there because I think people are getting ready for their next classes and we're starting to lose a few folks, but they're all saying thank you so much. I wish I could convince them to unmute and talk directly to you instead of me being very funny. Very good. Yes, I like that.
You got to be able to laugh at yourself sometimes.
We really, really appreciate your time and your advice. And I think you gave us some great things to think about with our brand and so on. Thank you so much for working with our EED students in particular, and also the other folks too. I know they're going to look forward to hearing from you. Paul Reams, everybody, we really appreciate your time. And thank you, students, for coming and hanging out with us for hour and a half, and I hope you learned something today. We're going to continue with these engineering excellence webinars throughout the semester, so stay tuned. Everybody have a great evening. Thanks for coming.
Have a good night.
You too.